Okay, so it's 3:02, and at this point in time, I have no one waiting to be let in. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. My name is Susan Brown. I am the Superintendent of Schools for the Germantown Central School District. And this is our third community panel discussion. And I'd like to introduce our panel today. And please forgive me for pausing to let additional folks in. That will happen pretty much throughout. Today, Yvonne Waters is with us. Yvonne is our Director of Special Education and Pupil Personnel Services. We have Beverly Marr. She is our elementary principal and oversees the program for our pre-K through sixth grade students. And we have Jim Palmieri, who is our building and grounds administrator. Hang on a second while I let a few folks in. And I would like to also make note that Paul Swighton is with us. Paul Swighton is our health and safety specialist from our Questar 3 BOCES. He works hand in hand with the district for all health and safety issues. So as you can imagine, we see a lot of Paul as we are working through our guidelines that were presented to us from the New York State Education Department and the New York State Department of Health regarding what school will look like for the 2020-2021 school year. First of all, I want to welcome everyone and just once again show our thanks. The input that we have received in the first two community forums has been very, very helpful to us as we continue to refine, if you will, our plan for reopening in September. I would like to point out some of this things might be a little bit redundant for those of you who have been with us before, but I did see a couple of new names in there, so I don't want to jump too quickly into responding to questions. I would like to point out that our reopening plan, which is entitled Reopen GCS, a living document, is posted to our website and has been updated. I've actually lost count 3 or 4 times. The most recent update is as of tomorrow will be a whole week old, and that was issued on August 14th. We are working on several things which I made note of. We just had the Monday community forum. I had mentioned a few things. A couple of folks, excuse me a minute. A couple of folks have pointed out that we have not issued a latest version, if you will, but that is being worked on as we speak. So the latest version is that things that we're working on that will come up in the upcoming updated version is a better definition of mask breaks. There are still substantial questions on mask breaks, not at Germantown, but really across our broader community. So across the whole BOCES, the component districts of our BOCES, we continually talk about mask wearing and mask breaks. And some of your questions also asked questions about that. PPE specific. So we know that families are responsible for ensuring that a student who is coming to in-person instruction will be wearing a mask. And some of our families have reached out and said, we would like some guidelines. There's some recent information out there that certain masks may not be appropriate. So we're working to put that together. We're doing that with our staff meetings. Also guidelines regarding backpacks, storage containers, those types of questions have been coming in as parents are just trying to prepare for school. Obviously, in a worldwide pandemic, preparing for school is different from any other time. We make up our mind about a good idea of how to store students' items, since we are not allowed to use any lockers in the school. And then a better idea comes along. So once again, we did create the title of our plan to include the words, a living document. I know that is not comfortable to everyone, and believe me, if we could have a perfect document and send it out with a good month for everybody to be able to prepare, we would have done that. But this is an ever-changing landscape for us. We continue to meet the leadership team almost daily, at least for a catch up on what the staff is concerned about, what the community may have questions about. What is the new information coming out of state ed? What is the new information coming out of the New York State Department of Health? In addition to that, I'd like everyone to be aware that our principals meet with their counterparts in the other districts weekly. Our director, both directors meet with their counterparts, and that includes our transportation director, Jim Palmieri and Yvonne Waters, all meet with their counterparts. The superintendents are meeting at a 3 times a week period right now because, once again, the information is constantly coming and we digest it as a group. We submit clarifications for clarifications and receive clarifications from multiple entities, and that is ongoing. Department of Health meetings, with the exception of last week when we met several times, is continuing to be weekly for superintendents and the Department of Health, and weekly for all school nurses and the Department of Health. And I must say that many of our superintendents do attend both. I also want to announce that the next Reopen GCS Task Force meeting is scheduled for September. We do anticipate that that group will get back together to look at everything that's happened since we issued our several versions of our plan. And that group will then continue to meet. So it is very much on our radar that there might have to be adjustments in some of the things in the plan. I would like to say that although we may begin some in-person instruction, and then there might have to be a change here or there in scheduling, and the improvement of the instruction is ongoing, with, of course, a goal to make not only our in-person, but our remote instruction as strong as possible. Health and safety is not the same. Health and safety will be hammered out with everything clear. And that is really our focus. And that was, I believe, shared with our entire school community on our guiding assumptions page of our plan, page 4, which says health and safety of our students and staff is the priority. So bear that in mind, that when we talk about tweaking things, adjusting things, making changes, I'm talking about program. Program is typically, in a simple world, defined by the schedule we create. And is it possible that maybe something within the schedule does not work as well? For instance, maybe we're struggling to get those lunches to the classrooms under the schedule that we have imposed upon ourselves. That is something we would look back and change. The next topic I have for the introduction portion of this panel discussion is the parent survey. We put out a parent survey that we expected to go out last Thursday, and it did not go out until last Friday. And 70% of the parents in our community, parents and guardians in our community, were able to respond to us by the deadline of Monday at midnight. And I cannot thank you enough. And I know I speak for the entire leadership team. You have now given us the massive missing piece to the puzzle. We were stuck. We were stuck designing our programs. We were stuck designing our schedule. We could not move forward. And now that we have that information, and our clerical staff and principals have worked hard, even since the survey closed on Monday, to reach out to any families who we have not received information from, and to make that connection, to point them toward reopen plans if they had not seen them, and to have conversations. And we hope to have our complete numbers by Friday. It is actually a very big objective, but that's pretty much how it's been going around here lately. We pick the big objective and we work hard to get to it. In the meantime, though, I do have the original survey numbers for you. Once again, 70% of all of our students, parents, and guardians, and that's important because that meant we had data for 70% of our children. Okay, and that's an important distinction because some families have multiple children. So it was 70% of our children, we have their parents or guardians commitment to either remote or in-person instruction. 62% of those children are now committed to in-person instruction. 38% of those children are now committed to remote instruction. And for those of you, I just want to make sure to clarify that that commitment we consider to be through, including the first quarter or trimester of the upcoming school year. So the quarter is for the grades 7 through 12. But as you are likely aware, in the elementary and pre-K, parents may not know this, that the trimester is for grades pre-K through 6. So that is the commitment that we requested. And I just really can't stress enough the thanks that we have. We are now already diving into, now we can find out things such as which rooms will have classes in them. So without going into too much detail and taking away the time that we need to respond to your posed questions, I will tell you that that answers so many of them now that we can design the program, exactly which classrooms are being used, therefore making which classrooms available for other things. Something as simple, it may seem simple, but it's not, the assignment of bathrooms. Now we know how many students are in what areas of the building. And so much work can be done now. And once again, I thank you. We hope by Friday to have 100% of the students committed to either in-person instruction here under the roof of GCS or the remote instruction. And once again, we have our clerical staff and administrators working on that. Today is August 20th. The first time, according to our plan at this moment, the living document, the first time a student will be coming here for in-person instruction is September 28th. We are grateful to have that period of time, and the fringe benefit of that, if you will allow us to have remote for 2 weeks for all children. That is an important time period for us. We are going to test all of the things we have put into place. This is super important, and I know it's, excuse me a minute. I know it can pose a hardship regarding childcare for parents, but the reason why we want to do this is to test all these systems that we have worked on to ensure that our remote system will work effectively. And that is so that we are entirely prepared in case we are shut down like we were last March. The other thing we're really working on is trying to align to the best of our ability what it looks like in the remote model and what it looks like in the in-person model. And the reason for that is because we have to plan for the potential of transitioning back and forth. And we don't want that transition to be massive for our children, or for that matter, the staff. So the more we can make the model look like, as far as schedule, as far as when do you do math, when do you do reading, when are your electives in the high school, the more we can make it look like that for the children who are learning remotely, the better off we will be if a transition is required. Excuse me. Okay, that being said, I'm going to jump right into some of the questions. And I would like to remind the folks that are here to please feel free to pose additional questions in the chat. And then at the end, we will go ahead and you probably want to wait to hear the responses, and that's great, but we will take some time and look at those as well. So masks, again, a big topic of conversation. And we had a question regarding, will students be required to wear masks all the time, even when they're in their classroom doing their work at their stations? And I'm going to start this off by reading the words that we still have in our plan and have not adjusted yet. For in-person learning, all individuals will wear masks and maintain social distancing. Mask breaks, which is defined as the removal of a mask, may be taken in specific circumstances when social distancing of at least 6 feet is well established, with little or no movement of individuals expected. Now, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. And it is so helpful to read your questions, because then we understand, is the message that the Reopen GCS team thought it would be, or are you hearing something different? And so we had a little bit of feedback where folks were saying they thought a mask break could take place with a little movement. That was absolutely not the intent. I think, so the intent was that it would be a period of time when there's no expectation of movement. So the training that we will be giving to our students and our staff before our students and our families via an orientation, which will be happening before children come back to school for all families who are doing in person, and really those who are not, if they would like to join in, because many topics will be covered. The expectation is that we will have routines and protocols firmly in place. So for example, if everyone in a classroom is now going to read, say, a paragraph or two on their own, but at their station, and depending upon the age level of the children, for the youngest, you would certainly want to ensure that using the toilet facilities has been taken care of for the time being. So that's what we meant by little or no expectation. But in fact, what we anticipate is if someone, anyone, including the teacher or person in a supervisory capacity, were to need to get out of their seat, they would then say, mask break is over, or put your masks on. And I'm not going to dictate those words, because the way this is done in pre-K looks different from seniors in high school. All masks would then be put on before a person gets up and therefore has the potential to leave their space and cross over someone else's 6-foot space. So I wanted to clarify that. And I also wanted to explain that we are still looking into the data that we have, which includes what other districts are doing regarding the length of time of a mask break. So once again, I will state, lunch is an obvious mask break. There are times when outdoor periods, even if they're not very long periods, again, with well-established social distancing and the likelihood that no one will get up. Because the last thing we want to do is say, here's a mask break, and a half a second later, stop the mask break. So we really want to get ourselves set up well for that mask break. Outside is a very attractive time to have a mask break, but there will be some in the classroom. And we are still getting a handle on that and getting a lot of information from our teachers, but also what other schools are doing. There will likely be a number per day that will be considered the minimum number of mask breaks per day. And there will likely also be a minimum length of time. I also want to clarify one more thing. When we talk about individuals wearing masks, that is all individuals. That is not just students. It is all individuals. So masks are part of our guiding assumption. What I read to you about masks is number two. It is number two only to the health and safety of students and staff is a priority. And we know that because what we know, and there's a lot that the world does not know right now, and that's really the essence of a worldwide pandemic. There are things we don't know, but what we do know is wearing a mask and social distancing together, as well as hand hygiene and reducing shared items, is the way to ensure that our health and safety protocols are appropriate. And that has been the assumption all along. So just to reinforce, wearing of a mask is not debatable. Now, we did have some information from parents early on and some other folks that some folks did not want their child to wear a mask. I will tell you that that was one fact that led us down the road, one of many, to giving parents a choice of remote or in-person learning. That should have covered most of the few mask questions that I had on here, but I may revisit it again. We had one question about temperature checks and how they can be inaccurate in hot weather. And I will add that they can also be inaccurate in cold weather. And so one of the reasons for the S-shaped line, is to give that individual's body temperature time to acclimate so that when we do a temperature check, we are getting an accurate reading. There is some talk in the world about doing temperature checks on buses, in cars. We are looking at that because we want to do this as efficiently as possible, but we want to do it as effectively as possible. So accurate temperature readings is actually the most important outcome. If what we know is if students are on a hot school bus and or wearing a lot of warm clothing and a very heated school bus, that we are likely to get an inaccurate temperature reading. What some schools are doing is then taking those children for a secondary test. And that is something, again, we are looking at what everybody else is doing, and we can only do this as a community. So all ideas are welcome. My next item, I probably covered with the masks. It was clarification on mask wearing in a classroom regarding students leaving their seat and potentially being within someone else's 6 by 6 foot area without a mask. That would never be acceptable, not in any case whatsoever. So again, training the students so that they know immediately when they hear the end of a mask break, that is an immediate response from them. And it will not be different in every classroom. It will likely be one thing in the primary grades, the earliest primary grades. We have to remember that there are several teachers who teach these children, and we can't make it too complicated. So the elementary will probably come up with their protocols and the high school with their protocols, but we are talking about what the trigger words would be. And we are also going to use some of the time during the first 2 weeks of full remote to provide some of these trainings. So we're certainly not going to wait until the children walk in to say, here's 100 things you need to learn. That is actually going to be our primary topic, our primary curriculum, if you will, during the 2 weeks of beginning of school when all students are remote. There's a quick clarification on, apparently I had stated the loosening of mask break restrictions, and I would like to clarify that. So once again, this is not about when it is appropriate to wear a mask, and the fact that we are focused on wearing masks as a primary part of our health and safety plan and protocol. It could be that we might begin with one length of time being the minimum recommended, and possibly if we find there are more very appropriate times that we could consider making that a bit longer as a minimum period, or possibly when the weather is good and students are going outside more, considering more mask breaks based on the fact that we are outside versus inside. But the bottom line of wearing masks is not going to ever be loosened unless we are told by the Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, and CDC guidelines that masks are no longer needed. I do not see that in the foreseeable future, and that is something we will talk about when it happens. There was a question about tutors. Tutors were listed on the budget page, page 28 of our plan. So I'd love to clarify that. So the school district has always used tutors. If a student is out with a medical excuse, we use tutors. Some of our teachers also wear the hat of a tutor. Some of our subs are tutors, and tutors are a main part of any school district. We also always need more tutors, just like we always need more subs. We have wonderful subs here at Germantown Central, and many times they are certified teachers, and many times they then get a position and are no longer available. And so we have a high turnover of subs. We do have some tutors we've used for years and years, and they're sort of our standard group, but we would love to have some more. But there is, so any of our students at any point in time could be taught by tutors. I think the essence of this question, though, excuse me, had something to do with the staffing list that we noted for remote instruction. So I'll read it to you. It's on page 28. We listed under contractual hirings that we would like to have. Remote instruction provided by a vendor, BOCES-wide consortium, or county-wide consortium. And we also listed tutors. I'm not seeing it right now, but it is in there. So a big question that we've received, whoops, sorry, somebody's knocking. A big question that we received is, will my children be taught by Germantown Central School District teachers? Well, now is the time that we have the data we need to design that schedule. For many years in a school district the size of Germantown, we have taken advantage of vendors to provide instruction to students in the high school especially, less so in the elementary, mostly in the high school. Let me give you a couple examples so you understand how we use a vendor. It is possible that a student in the high school is doing a career tech ed program offsite during part of the day. In large school districts, that is typically easily scheduled because they have so many sessions of the courses that student is required to take here at the school. In Germantown, for instance, if it's an 11th grader who is spending the afternoon at one of our wonderful career tech ed programs off-site, the basic courses that student needs has to be taught in the other half of the day. Occasionally, our schedule does not allow for that student to take a course, and we have typically used Apex Learning, which is a vendor, which we do purchase through our BOCES, and we have for years. We have also used the distance learning program, which is provided through our Northeastern Regional Information Center. The acronym is NARIC. We have used that on and off for years. We've used it for summer programs for students when they have to make up credits, and we have used it upon occasion for credit accrual, which is when a student is trying to take a class in the summer. We have also had some other really unique circumstances with students when maybe for some reason, maybe they're new to us and the school district they were in taught classes in a different sequence. And for that student, to ensure that student has every course they need for graduation, one might be provided through Apex Learning, distance learning. We did look at another vendor. It's the name of this vendor is iTutor. This is a program which has been used for many, many years. Primarily, I think it started on Long Island, and the schools have used it for many, many years very effectively. So those are the types of vendors we looked at. And we, again, we were casting a wide net because we had no idea how many students were going to commit to coming in to in-person and how many were going to commit to the remote. We are going to use everything available to us to put together a program with the priority being that we use Germantown Central School District teachers. That is what we all want. That is what we have always wanted. But there might be occasions when we need to use either a tutor for a very unique student situation where they might need a different instructional model, or one of these commercial vendors, or Apex Learning, which is a commercial vendor, to provide courses that we cannot get into our schedule. So I hope that addresses the couple of questions on tutors and on who is going to be teaching our children. I have someone who's recommending we take a look at tents. I just want to throw this out there. I had mentioned this once, but there's lots of different kinds of tents, right? So it is not 100% out of the question to get tents here on our property. It's actually a very attractive idea. We would need to know the availability of tents. So what I talked about last time was what I like to call the pop-up tent. I know my family uses a pop-up tent for a lot of things. They're very convenient. They're pretty light to carry around. And what I had originally clarified is that we cannot use those, and that is true. There are also commercial grade tents out there, and they're typically used for large, family occasions, weddings, those types of things. It is possible the availability of those are more than usual due to the reduction in large gatherings, such as would normally need these tents. But the issue with this is, and I just saw Paul wake up over there, because Paul, not that you were not awake, but I know what Paul's going to say. State Ed will consider this, in essence, another building. We will need to abide by all facility rules. That doesn't mean we're not going to do it for that reason, but I want you to understand that that will be considered. We are required to get not just our architect's approval, but State Ed approval to use such a thing. We are going to look at it for sure. I will say that I think they are extremely expensive, but I'm just telling you where we are with that. And it doesn't mean it won't happen. I think it's important for the community to understand what it entails to go that route. We had a question about using classrooms that have sinks in them before other classrooms. When I was working with Mrs. Marr and the whole team to identify what rooms to use in the elementary for student in-person instruction, we absolutely took a look at the rooms that have sinks in them, and we do have that on our radar. Please know, though, only really the primary grades have rooms with sinks in them, and of course the science labs upstairs as well in the secondary building. We had another question regarding hand sanitizer stations. It is absolutely being recommended to have hand sanitizer in every single room. It is not a recommendation that it's touchless. I looked into it briefly, and by definition, once you touch it to receive the hand sanitizer on your hands, and then you sanitize your hands, excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. One thing I forgot to do to prepare. So their touchless hand sanitizers is not something the district is looking to purchase at this time. And there's another question that covers a few more things, and so I'll go back to that later. But the sinks. So whatever room does not have a sink will have a hand sanitizer station. And I may as well go into those other items since I started going there. In our bathrooms, we did an analysis of the bathrooms, both student use and adult use bathrooms. We are very fortunate to be ahead of the game in having touchless paper towels. They are not in every single bathroom. We have one bathroom that we're going to upgrade, but we have them in almost every bathroom. We have the touchless paper towels, and we also have many of our sinks are touchless sinks. Part of the capital project did redo a bathroom, one of our bigger bathrooms that we believe is going to be identified for grades 5 and 6 to be using. And part of our protocol is to teach techniques. So part of our protocol for students and staff is when you enter a bathroom, you wash your hands first with soap and water and dry them. You use the facility, and then you wash your hands again with soap and water and dry them. So that is what we feel absolutely aligns with the guidance that we have received for proper hand washing. Okay, my next one I'd like to bring up was a recommendation. And again, please keep them coming. We really enjoy these. And we were thinking along these lines a bit. Now that we have our numbers, we can really look at what drop-off is going to look like. And an individual had recommended maybe you want to think about 3 times. That is on the table for sure. Once we look at how many students are going to be dropped off in the morning, it is quite possible that there will be more than one time for sure, and as many as 2 or 3. I don't know. I don't want to say it until we sit down and look at it, but maybe it'll be 4 different times. But the idea, of course, is to keep kiddos out of inclement weather and to have them go through our line. We will have lines on the floor for these students. That was another part of a question. And we will have supervision monitoring this. So it won't quite be like the grocery store where the lines and the waiting spots are on the floor, but people are kind of doing whatever they want. It is going to be more like how a school has students waiting in line, and that is with an adult overseeing to ensure that students are socially distanced while waiting to have their temperature checked. My next one brought up the secondary students. So at this point in time, now that we have our numbers, we don't exactly have them all yet, but we will by Friday. And next week's project is to get to the nitty-gritty on many of these things. The person was recommending we contemplate allowing elementary students enter in one area and secondary in another. We're going to take a look at that because another question was, can my older children stand with my younger children? So obviously we're going to navigate that and we will address both of those concerns and take a look at how that works. We also don't want to ask parents to come 3 times. So if you have an elementary children and some secondary children, we certainly are not going to ask you to come at 2 different drop-off times. Using a second door is a great idea, and we will definitely be looking at that once we get our numbers and look at the details. Oh, there was a question also regarding what some other districts are doing. So I wanted to throw out a clarification. And I do believe Governor Cuomo made a similar clarification about a week ago. It is up to school districts to design their model of hybrid. Okay, so the 100% in person, everybody already knows what that looks like. We didn't take a real lot of time to sit down and fashion that. because we know what it looks like. And we certainly have a sense of what it looks like with 100% remote. The tricky business from the very beginning is what about some of each? And once we had posed to our families to ask them to commit to one or the other, we knew we were in a hybrid model. If you look at all the schools' hybrid models, you will see many, many differences. I do not know the reasons why every school chose to do the model they did. I do know the reasons why the schools in our BOCES chose what they did, because we talk 3 times a week. I don't have conversations with districts in other BOCES. Honestly, what I do get indirectly is information through our district superintendent, who is the head of our district BOCES. She meets with all the other BOCES and we get information from her. But it is not down to what every specific school has done. There are some schools who have designed a shortened in-person part of a school day, but the expectation is, and they will be taking attendance for this, I'm sure, because we all are required to, the expectation is the student would perform the remaining hours of schoolwork in their own home or wherever they go after they leave the physical building. At Germantown, we are looking at the full day for the in-person model. We did not look at a shortened day. And there's another school district, several of them actually, that have 1 day full remote. So that model is not off our radar. I have always seen that model as something that now that we have the numbers, now that we can look at who is here when, it is potentially something we would consider, but probably for secondary. And the reason for that is we do find it would be a hardship, we believe, to have the youngest children also not coming to school on 1 day. That was something that the team talked about for a long time. And as of today, that's where we're at with that. It may become apparent once we talk, we start structuring our day, that might have to happen. Okay, there was a question about pre-K and I do want to address it. So pre-K is a fully grant funded program. It is state funding that funds the pre-K grant. The pre-K grant, we had really a false alarm. I'm thinking 2 budgets ago. That's right, 2 budgets ago, or maybe it was only 1, where we were notified by the state that we would still get the money, but it would not come in the form of a grant. It would come in the form of state aid. And so therefore, we increased our state aid by the amount of the grant. That went up, and the money then came out of the general fund, which is the regular budget for the school district. The state did say that. We did make that adjustment, but that adjustment, okay, it was only 2 ago, because this past winter, when we did the board presentations for the budget, it was clarified that that never happened and that it is still coming in the form of a grant. So it is purely a grant-funded program. The maximum amount is $380,000 for 38 children, which is the ceiling of the number of students we can have in that program. So that's a quick clarification. Another math question that I already addressed. Oh, a great question on bandwidth. Yes, we did our digital equity and access group talked a lot about bandwidth. There are many things happening with it. So bandwidth is the ability, is part of our network infrastructure that allows folks in this building to use this building's internet and go out into the internet to provide remote learners with instruction digitally. So the first thing we did, as you can imagine, and this is going to be a quick summary, we did an assessment on our bandwidth, because our bandwidth has been increased 3 times over the last 3 years. keeping up with the times, right? You probably had your bandwidth increased in your home by your provider because that is the ever-changing internet. And not only have we increased it 3 times, but we also have a fiber-backed system at the school district, and we have recently adjusted all of our access points, which provides the Wi-Fi in each classroom and throughout the building, at each learning station, if you will. But in addition to that, we did have a group that reached out to families of children who were not engaged last spring to identify who they were. A lot of work, and it's in the plan, went into getting them connected. 3 new things have happened that I would like to share with you about this. First of all, GTEL, which provides internet to many, many of our families, as well as the school building. Mid-Hudson Cable, that has quite a few of our families as well, have been wonderful partners through this entire process. Not only have they provided financial assistance to our families who needed it so that they could have internet, we have also recently been given the opportunity to apply for a grant, and it's a NARIC-wide grant, so the whole northeastern section of New York State, where every school district is purchasing a number of MiFis, so it's like a hotspot. And it can be from the provider of the family's choice, which is super important in our area, because maybe not all providers are available to that individual residence location. And so I would just like to report that our Germantown Student Educational Foundation is paying for this, and that we have purchased 15 of these hotspots. But in the meantime, many of the original families who had maybe no internet in their location, due to a recent upgrade, I think I'm saying this accurately, from GTEL, who is in the middle of a broadband statewide project, a lot of their cabling, which I think I can safely say is all fiber, has been put out there. So many of our families that had a hardship of not being able to have internet last spring are already reporting that they are now connected. We purchased the 15 family hotspots, if you will, anyway, because we do have a number of new families in our district, and we don't know if maybe other families could have some financial hardship and need assistance. So those are 3 things. Also, the Columbia County Supervisors Group has been working very closely with the internet providers in our area, in our county, I should say specifically, to ensure that these families have what they need to engage in remote learning, both if it is either by choice or certainly if it is something demanded due to a school closure. So I do hope that sort of updated everybody. I will say that when we did the assessment of the bandwidth in the school district, we had some pretty good results, but until we try it, we just don't have it definitively. So once again, the 2 weeks at the beginning will help us with the full remote, what that looks like, because we will have teachers here. But also once we get into our hybrid model, it is very possible we might identify an area in the school or a concern that we will then address. The next question I think I already covered, sort of out of order, and that was regarding who would be providing remote online learning if it is not a GCS teacher. So I think I covered that one. And the vendor question, so that one is good. Oh, this is a great question. So do you have plexiglass dividers installed in every classroom? No, we do not. We have not installed plexiglass dividers, nor do we have a plan to install plexiglass dividers. We are We did purchase acrylic dividers when the facilities planning, the New York State Ed Department changed the products that were available to companies to create desk shields. We were fortunate to put an order in right away. I literally got an email a little while ago. We will be receiving those items next week. They are shipping out tomorrow. They are made in New York State, and they are coming here to Germantown. Now, we are going to be using these desk shields as teachers and related service providers and other staff in the building request. We have had a few people say that they'd prefer not to have them. And we're very excited to have those available. The next question. So staff has, there was a question about surveying staff. We did do, I think, one survey of staff. And since then, it's mostly staff meetings. But I know of another survey that will be going out to staff. And if I know that we're planning on doing more surveying of staff. And this was requiring a risk profile for individuals regarding a risk profile. What we have done is our staff communication is ongoing. And from a management point of view, yes, we are having those conversations, and staff are have been directed to reach out to management, specifically human resources, if they have any concerns. So of course, we've been working on that, and I wanted to make sure I covered that one. Great question about having enough subs. So I'm going to preface this with, we have never had enough subs. So again, I mentioned earlier, we're always posting for subs. As a matter of fact, it's like this thing that's been posted forever under employment on our website. We can always use more subs. The principals and director, as soon as someone applies, they immediately do the interview and do a recommendation. So I think the person's concern was more about if we need subs during a pandemic. And yes, we know that that is a likely need. The way we're approaching that is we have our staff working in teams. Just like we did last spring, we knew that it had to be a team approach. So subs can come in and certainly will as we need them, but we know that the team, for instance, in the elementary, teams are primarily based on grade level. We have a team of people who focus on the 4th grade, the 5th grade, kindergarten, all grades have a team where everyone meets often, and there is a concerted effort to ensure that every student needs are being met instructionally and in other ways as well. In the high school, teams look a little bit different. 7th and 8th grade, that is our middle school team. That group of teachers teach all the 7th and 8th grade students. And we're excited about this team because for many years, it wasn't really a team for the 7th and 8th grade. A couple of teachers did instruct those students in a typical manner, but now we really have a very defined team. 9 through 12, the teams look different. So they look, they're really based on content area. So the English department is a team, and the social studies department is a team. And the science department, the math department, all the departments have teams. We do have a lot of singletons out there, and we do have our neighboring school districts, and we have our BOCES to give them some experiences with folks that are singletons in other districts as well. So we can always use more subs, and if we need more subs, certainly we will hire them as needed, but our primary approach is the team approach. On the last page, sorry. Okay, there was a quick question about siblings waiting in the morning screening line together. Yes, and I want to just rephrase it. Members of the same household do not need to socially distance. So, Paul, I'm right, right? Yes. So members of the same household on a bus do not need to socially distance and can actually sit in the same seat. I will tell you that it doesn't actually increase the number of students on a bus because it sits a person in a seat that we were using in the socially distancing on a bus. It actually keeps the number the same. But yes, of course, they can be together. And we would apply the same to the queue of people waiting for their temperature check. In fact, we would prefer it because, of course, once again, we want families to only have to do the one drop-off, not multiple drop-offs, and the household members may stand together. And that helps with our little folks. So we do like that. And my second to the last one, we had a question about requesting certain drop-off times. So what we're going to do with that, to the extent possible, we would like people to have a choice. But I cannot make that promise at this time. Once we get the numbers and we look at the number of drop-off times we need, we are going to be reaching out to our families. We are hoping that folks who have complete flexibility will say, you can give me whatever you need to allow folks who have other constraints on their schedule, on their day's schedule, to have a preference. And that's the way we will approach that. And my last one that I got off just before we started our meeting, and again, thanks for using that email. It was very helpful to us. This is a bit of a tough question. If a student who is remote for the first trimester or quarter then wants to switch to in-person, can we assure they will be bus transportation? That's a bit of a tough question. Once again, until we see how many of these students require bus transportation, it is very possible we will have empty available seats on the bus. And so, yes, we hope so, but I cannot make that promise at this time. And now I'm going to take a drink of water and I'm going to toss the ball over to Mrs. Marr and have her dive in on a couple of questions that she is prepared to respond to.
Hi, everybody. So we are really happy to have finally gotten your responses via the survey. And over the last 2 days, we've been calling all of those families we had not heard from. And we feel like we have a really good handle on it. I know that I met today with the elementary staff for quite a long time talking about that data and all of the implications of that data. And I have put it out to them to begin thinking about that data for their teams and how that might look as far as a combination of remote and in-person instruction. Please know that our absolute goal is to have our teachers be our teachers, right? Whether your child is remote or in person, it is our #1 goal. It benefits all of us. So that is the #1 effort we are putting forth to try to find strategies to make that happen. I'll be meeting with them early next week, Monday and Tuesday, as teams to be able to come up with some options on how we'll look at that. From that, we'll come up with those classroom rosters and then those final supply lists that I know everybody's been very patiently waiting for. So we expect to have those out to you next week by the end of the week, so we can get that moving along. We've had several questions about orientation and how will my child meet their teacher. And again, we are talking about ways and finding different situations that other schools have been using to have fun videos or great orientations on video that teachers can bring their kids into the classroom virtually and to make those acquaintances. The kids can meet each other virtually. We know it's not ideal. We'd much rather be doing this in person, but we're taking the circumstances that we're in and we're making the best of it. Somebody has asked if we could be doing that on a one-to-one basis. And at this point, I'm going to say we'll start with a whole group thing, and I think the teachers naturally may do some one-on-ones. We always do have that November conference that is a one-to-one meeting with the family and the teacher and the child. So initially, this orientation would be with the classroom that both I and the teacher can explain what to expect when they return. So we'll be having several different types of orientation videos being put out to you prior to your child coming to school or beginning remote learning. We also had the question asked about our virtual schedule, and we'll be writing schedules for whether your child's in the building or if they're learning virtually. And so the virtual schedule really will depend greatly upon the age and the developmental level of the child. But when we set those times of that 9 to 1:30 or that 8 to 3 section, please understand that that is not screen time. That is time, depending again on the grade level, where that instruction is being given in there. And then, for example, like if you're a younger child, you might go out on a leaf project in your yard and collect leaves and do some paper wax drawings with them, something like that, and then come back with your class and present what you've shown and talk about what your findings were on your mission to your class. So it's kind of like a series of instruction. Go out and work either collaboratively with another friend or a partner via Zoom or with your family, and then come back and present. And then also during these hours, they'll receive instruction from their music teachers or their art teachers or their PE teachers or interventionists that they might work with speech and language and things like that. So we are just asking for the commitment of families to make sure that your child is available during those hours for learning. And it could be, again, independent learning with the family, or it could be whole group, or it could be in small teams, whatever that looks like. So I'm trying to clarify that. Once we have a firmer schedule, which will be happening very soon, we'll be sure to get that out to families. Again, expect that that may change as we go through the process to see, to work out the kinks and the bugs from it. But we will certainly have a schedule so you know what to expect at home. Another question did come up about attendance. And if my child is not a good virtual learner and I have chosen remote learning, would they be marked absent if they did not show up on Zoom? And the answer for that is yes. So like always, like we did in the spring, if we have children that are resistant to the technology and to working with that, we'll work with your family and we'll work with the child to try to provide steps to bring them into that culture and that form of learning. Because ideally that is how they relate and communicate with both their peers and the adults in their learning setting. So that part is pretty critical. If families did choose remote, we understand that the child will be using the technology and be asked to be a part of that. That's not the only thing we use in our instruction. Please know that. There are so many other facets to learning, and the technology is just a component of it. Somebody asked about an after-school program, and those of you familiar with our district know that we have a wonderful GAP program after school. It is not part of our school district. It is run by a separate entity, but they're in our building, and it's their Germantown after-school program. I know that we'll be beginning that very soon as the year begins based upon our needs, and we will be sending more information out about that. So we may be reducing numbers and membership on that depending upon what our capabilities are for that program. But yes, we will be offering an after-school program, thankfully. A question came up about if there is a student with undiagnosed learning disabilities, how will we accommodate those disabilities within the learning? And I'm going to say we will do it just like we always do, right? So whether we're remote learning or whether we're in person, we always hold weekly meetings with the teams, with our grade level teachers, our counselors, our social workers, our interventionists, and we meet about observations of children we're seeing, data from children we're seeing, we bring up concerns, we create interventions that we can try, we communicate with the family, and we talk to them about those concerns, and then we monitor that progress. And at that point, if we're seeing successive months of no progress, we begin to look at higher level interventions, etc. But if a student is undiagnosed, we would just continue to work on those interventions allowing the family to be a part of that process as well. So it really is no different whether the child is remote or if it is in-person learning. Sue answered the question about the plexiglass, so that's good. We're taking a look at setting up our rooms now that we know and have a better understanding of how many kids in each room, and we're looking at different configurations of their space and how to create that personal area. A lot of good ideas are coming in from parents, and we appreciate those. Again, we'll be defining that very soon to families and letting you know how you might be able to help with that. So. You'll notice that your school supply list this year will add things like some hand sanitizer as optional items, or perhaps earbuds, a set of earbuds. We will have some here for them in school, most likely. We ask that you have them for them at home as well, because we know that they get lost easily, they break easily. So we will be adding those to the list this year as well. And I believe the other thing is to kind of cover this already, asking why other school districts are perhaps having less hours of instruction than we are. And I think I covered that when I talked about the remote learning process, that it is not just straight screen time learning. Other districts who have designated smaller amount of times have to assume that after that initial 3 hours, there would be work that the student would be doing afterwards. So their learning doesn't end just within those 3 hours. But we have set it up so that the student will be learning independently and then along with the teacher within that parameter of time that we have set. And I think I've answered all the questions that had to do with the elementary. I'm sure you'll put something in the chat if I've missed it. But we're super excited to be able to get this information and to have some concrete plans coming out your way. So thank you for your input.
Thank you, Mrs. Marr. And now I'm going to ask Mrs. Waters address a couple of questions that fell in her area.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to have you all join us. We've been, as Sue and Bev said, in a lot of meetings, and I've sat in on almost every one of them because I want to hear what everybody is saying. As far as questions that came my way, the big one was under supervision. And the question surfaced around page 14 is identified, 4 and 5. Students will keep right and maintain 6 feet between them when moving throughout the building. The person's question had to do with who's going to be monitoring this during instructional time. How would we ensure that they're staying socially distanced? Who's enforcing it? So the answer to that question, Sue already began to touch upon when we talked about the screening process. The markers in the building will be very distinct, showing directionality in the building and what is an evident 6 feet apart. That's there for visuals for everybody, staff and students alike, and administrators for that matter. So they will be very distinct. Also, when the students begin that remote or that in-person instruction with us, we will train them. We will go through those processes and teach them hallway, if you will, so that they understand what properly socially distanced is and practice that. And it's going to take practice and they'll get used to that, and that will not go away. We will not one and done it. We have a series of retrainings going on. And for kiddos who really struggle with it, we'll give them even more instruction to make sure that they are properly trained and understand what socially distanced means in the hallway. As far as who is going to be monitoring this, staff members will be assigned to monitor transportation in the hall, movement in the hallways, movement to bathrooms. So people will be assigned to monitor these transitions in the hallway. As far as, there was a question about consequences for students who fail to socially distance. Consequences for not following social distancing really depends on the intent of why they were not being socially distanced. Was it just a mistake, an innocent mistake, or was it intentional, correct? So on a case-by-case basis, that will be addressed by the building principal and through our code of conduct. I think I've answered all those questions around supervision. That's really all I had from this point. But again, appreciate the questions, and if we weren't clear and we need to clarify, we're happy to do that. And so, you know, you can still reach out and get in touch with any one of us at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Waters. So I'm going to jump on a couple of those things and add a little more. So you may not have been in one of our earlier meetings. Our code of conduct now has a broad statement that, of course, our code of conduct outlines expected behaviors of students and illustrates that discipline and consequences will be implemented if students do not follow those expectations. And one of the expectations, the broad statement, is that students are required to follow all Department of Health guidelines. So it's not just about taking a mask off when they shouldn't have, all of those things. And of course, the disciplinarians in the building are the 2 building principals, and they are responsible for assigning consequences. You know, it does depend. Again, our statement was that everyone will wear masks and socially distance. So if a student by mistake steps into another student's 6-foot area, they have a mask on. But that's why we want both to happen. So that if a mistake happens, and mistakes happen with humans, or if a student makes a choice to disobey a guideline put forth by the New York State Department of Health, either way, the other students have masks on, or the other students are socially distanced. That's why we chose to use the word "and" in all uppercase. But in the meantime, if it is being done due to a student's failure to abide by the expected behaviors, that is something the disciplinarians in our building will address. And consequences, like everything in the code of conduct, do range from that have to be, consequences are assigned based on an investigation of the matter. So that's a disciplinarian's job. The most extreme consequence is basically out of school suspension. And what you can really think about is, in a worldwide pandemic, when health and safety is by far the priority for everyone, if a student refuses to abide by those rules, in essence, that student cannot be an in-person instruction student. And we will go to our code of conduct and implement what we are required to implement, so that that child is then suspended from the in-person program appropriately and receives tutoring. Or since we have a remote program in a hybrid, we could go that route. But I want you to know this is not something we are taking lightly. That was one thing. There was another clarification I wanted to mention. This is, there are some adjustments that were made by New York State Ed for the definition of instruction. Prior to this year and this situation, the definition of instruction was when a child was receiving instruction from a certified teacher. So in the building, when we counted our minutes, and there actually was a requirement for a number of minutes, we could only count the minutes when a certified teacher was in the room with them. We could not count the minutes, even though we know that our paraprofessionals can provide instruction, say during recess on a playground. Those minutes could not be counted. So now we have a flexibility. And I'm going to read to you the section in our plan on page 29, which is directly out of the New York State guidelines. It first talks about some flexibility with UPK, Universal Pre-K programs. And then it goes into flexibility with 180 minutes per week unit of study. That's a high school terminology. Flexibility in the delivery of physical education, and an allowance for a blend of hands-on and virtual science lab experiences. So the state did identify those areas. So you might have a child who's you've committed to remote instruction, like Beverly Marr had shared an example where there is a portion of that instructional period of time where attendance, of course, is taken because we are required to do so, and some explicit instruction or modeling is related to the child through our digital platform. And then the child is given an assignment or a project-based learning activity. All of those activities count as learning time. That is what's sort of new and different. It's almost like if we were allowed to count homework in the previous years prior to the pandemic, but we actually couldn't. So now it's certainly not as simple as homework. It is designing instruction so that a piece of it may be explicit or a modeling scenario or the practice of a skill, and then the student is assigned work to be done, and then the teacher interacts with the child as a follow-up to ensure what was taught was learned, and that's assessment. So those were my two quick clarifications, or additions really, not clarifications, and also pointing to where these items are in our plan. I know Mr. Didana, I believe, was not able to be with us. If you are, please say something, but I don't think he was able to join us. So I'm going to address a couple questions that he was prepared to respond to. So there's a question about the classes being offered at the secondary level. Other than the pandemic situation, there are a few other things going on regarding classes, and that is the financial situation. We have not only a pandemic, but we have an economic issue as well. So the Board of Education did put forth a plan to our voters in May regarding a budget that we really put together very carefully, because we had been given a forewarning by our state that there's the possibility of the loss of state aid. So we have been extremely careful in planning our instruction. And it is possible that, first of all, we have a list of electives that is extremely vast. Every year, students meet with their guidance counselor, and they identify in the secondary school, especially those in 9 through 12, less so in 7 and 8, electives that they would like to take. We do not run every class every year. We never have. In fact, we'd probably have to hire 10 teachers to run them all. But what we want to do is have the list, take a look at what the desire is, because we want children to have their choices if we can make it possible. And for many, many years, I've worked here since 2005, I have seen situations when 1, 2, or 3 students are enrolled in an elective course, and in August, it does not run, because again, we can run them as long as we have enough students in it. This year is no different, but we have the added pressure of the economic situation and the pandemic. I am not going to promise that every course, every child desired outside of the core requirements for graduation will be available, but I can promise we are working very hard to ensure those classes are being offered. We have the option of using vendors, as I spoke about earlier, the Apex Learning, the distance learning, to possibly provide to some students for an elective that cannot run the course that they desired. But now that we know who is coming in and who will not be here, we're going to look at that more closely. In fact, we have a team working daily at the high school schedule. Pods are very different, and that brings me to the other question. There were a couple of questions about the mixing of pods in the high school. So Germantown is looking very closely at how we can develop a schedule, which is the program, in the high school with little or no transition. It's probably not going to be no transition, but we are looking carefully at how we can reduce transition as much as possible. And that is a safety concern, but it affects our program. We are looking at having some teachers push into a room that students use as their home base for most of the day. There are likely going to be situations when students will need to leave that room for a course, or they might at some point in time. Here's an example. Maybe there's 15 students in a room and that is their home base. They will have some core classes in there that they all are taking. And, you know, that is easier in 7th and 8th grade and gets a little different in the upper secondary. And they will have their lunch in there. And it is possible during one period when 5 students are taking an elective and 5 others are taking a different one, and that they could remotely engage with that instructor while remaining in that physical room. These are the types of ideas that we're applying to reduce transition. When transition has to happen, we will have what Mrs. Waters shared regarding the movement through halls. We will look very carefully at the staggering of movement so that it's not a large number of students at once. And now go back to the basics, right? They are all wearing masks and social distancing. And she also, Mrs. Waters also talked about supervision, and that will be done by staff. I think that covered the questions that he was going to respond to. So now I would like to move to the questions that have been posed in the chat since we began. There's a question about the data that we just recently received and are building on about families who are committed to the first quarter or first trimester, either remote or in person. And the question was, would it be broken down by grade level? Well, in fact, it is broken down by individual child. In every single class in elementary and high school, we will know, this is a question I think about the high school model, we will know exactly which children will be sitting in the classroom and which children will be remotely receiving instruction from that Germantown Central teacher. And by the way, our teachers are on the edge of their seats waiting for this. So once that happens, the details, the big plan is set, the details will be created by our very talented teaching staff. There's a quick question about, will there be photos available of how the classrooms are set up since visitors are not allowed in the building? I do think Mrs. Marr probably hit on that after this chat came in, but I want to respond to it. Yes, in fact, we're looking at doing videos. We had a really cool sample today of what another school district had done for a video. And it gave us some great ideas. We were already thinking along those lines. Our goal will be that when you are given your time for your orientation or grade level night or open house, as it's called in many different districts, when your family engages virtually with that experience, we hope that you will have a sense of not even just the classroom, but what your child's day will look like. That is a goal. We're setting our sights high to achieve that goal, but that is what we are focused on doing. In fact, we also would like to include the bus, maybe a little bit about what specials look like. I'm picturing more in the elementary, of course, but throughout the school. In the high school, it might be more of a standard thing where you might see what one room looks like, and that would be indicative of most rooms in the high school. And again, this setup of classrooms is something that we received guidance, not only from the Department of Health guidance, but then further guidance from Needham Risk Management, which is a company that works with our insurance company, Utica National, as well as our architect. The next question, when a child who is an in-person model is homesick, will they be able to log on to the Teams or Zoom or whatever platform is being used in the junior and senior high so that they can participate? Well, actually, yes. That is a positive fringe benefit of the hybrid program, and it is excellent when that student returns in person, assuming they were well enough when at home to engage in the remote section. We are hoping that that child will be able to come back all caught up in their schoolwork. This is a question from a new GCS parent, and we get some every year. Welcome to the community. We are thrilled to have new families. What kind of communication and documentation will we expect from teachers? So you will be given a copy of your child's schedule for in-person or remote. And during orientation, you will hear more details of what that looks like for both the in-person model and remote. And then, of course, you can always reach out and communicate with the teacher of your child. And I don't know what grade level this is, so that's a somewhat general response. But I would also point this person to calling your principal, who would be more than happy to give you some grade level appropriate response to that. Another question talks again about the mask breaks. And it's asking specifically if we are going to give a minimum length of time, will we give a maximum? I will say that personally, my plan is to determine a maximum length of time. Once again, the goal is health and safety. We know that mask wearing and social distancing and good hand hygiene and good safety practices is how we will make it safe for people to be here. Therefore, the focus will be on likely a very short-term mask break. But we will define that in our guidance. And I think another one or two might have come in, so I'm going to jump into that. Oh, there's a question on transportation. Transportation is a big challenge in all school districts. Our original survey indicated that a very large percentage of our parents are going to somehow make transportation help us with transportation. If everyone after the first quarter and trimester decides to go fully in person, we would be in a great place. And would it create a transportation challenge? That is a possibility. We are very aware that some families simply cannot provide it. At this point in time, I think if I go back to the original survey, the percentages took us right into where we needed to be. Some folks might have a change in the requirement of their day based on their work. We are going to try to be flexible and meet the needs of these families who have so generously offered to help us with this major challenge. So thanks for asking that. The first day of school for the second week. Okay, so in the plan, let me point this out, certainly in our plan, in the section with the hybrid model, which is on page 5, you really want to take a look at page 5. I know I can't show it to you, and I'm not going to share my screen because I usually mess it up. Look at page 5 of the plan, post it on the website. If you do not have that ability, feel free to give us a call and we'll give you details. But the very first opening week of school, which is September 8th through 11th, there is no instruction for students who go to our school. That is not true for students with career tech ed and students who attend other schools but are residents of our district. We are obligated to provide, to make sure that our students going to career tech ed, CTE, which is mostly located in Hudson, they will go to those programs. But if their plan was to attend here or remote attend here, that week we do not have instruction. It is all professional development. The next 2 weeks, so starting September 14th and ending on September 25th, we are a fully remote program. Not CTE, not Tech Valley High, they have their own plans, but for students who attend Germantown Central School District, we are fully remote. That is our ability to troubleshoot our full remote program. It also allows us to begin the training of students in the newly created protocols based for health and safety before they set foot in the school. It allows us the ability to give orientations to families in a smaller group. So when the students, the orientation will occur prior to the students coming in, but not necessarily all on the same night like we do, or like we always used to do. That actually helps parents with multiple children as well. They can attend the pre-KK orientation and then they can pretend, or excuse me, they can do the first grade orientation. On September 28th, pre-K students are starting in person. On September 30th, students in grades 1 to 3 will join in, coming into the school on the bus to their in-person model daily. On October 5th, grades 4 to 6 begin in person. On October 13th, grades 7 and 8 come into the building. And on October 19th, students in grades 9 through 12 will begin daily in-person instruction. And those dates are for folks, families who have committed to the in-person program here at GCS. And that is the last question in the chat. So here's what I would like to finish up with. Our governor asked that every school district hold 3 meetings with their community within a certain time period. But I would like you to know that we have planned all along and had even put out our first community panel discussion prior to our governor's proclamation of the requirements. We will do this again. We still have the email set up. Please continue to send us emailed questions, clarifications, and I'm sure the next time we publish the Reopen GCS plan, a living document with us highlighting every section that has adjustments, new questions will arise. We're not closing down this excellent form of communication. Continue to email us, please. We will identify a date and have an additional community forum. And we may do an additional community forum right as school is opening. Today is August 21st. There's not a lot of August left. We will try to give you a good heads up. We'll probably robocall it out when we identify when it will happen. Please also know that Governor Cuomo recommended, actually required, that school districts have 1 staff panel discussion. Germantown held several before the requirement and will continue to hold them. Our staff has been meeting with us all summer long, and they will continue to meet with us as we respond to any challenges that arise or adjustments in requirements. So I just double-checked the chat to see if anything else came in. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for all the time you have taken to review all the documents we've posted. And I want to wish you and your families well. Be safe, Be well. And we'll be talking soon. Thanks again for everything.